I want to talk about, I want to talk about what I call teacher moves. And teacher moves are how a teacher or a tutor, because a tutor is a teacher, responds to their students during the lesson. It's those immediate shifts and changes and things that a teacher does in response to what's happening with their students. You know, a move, we often hear that in sports. If you take soccer, for example, you know, one player does something and that whatever that player does then causes the other player to shift or move. I think about my son playing goalkeeper in soccer, football, and as a player would come down and go to shoot at the goal, he would position himself as the goalkeeper, very particular to what the other player was doing. So it's that move that we make. Or with chess or checkers, we see the other player makes a move, and then we decide after watching to make a move ourselves, but we don't know what we're going to do until we see what the other person has done. And that's kind of what teachers have to do. We have to make these moves during our lessons in response to our students. And we do that because we really want to help them learn better. And the moves that we make are based on the feedback, the information we're getting from our students. And that information isn't always verbal. It's not always something that we ask them and they verbalize, but they can tell us things with their body language, with the way they respond or with the way they don't respond, what we might need to do differently to help them. And so on that feedback, we make a decision to shift or do something in our lesson as a response to help improve our students' learning. And so today I just want to share a little bit about teacher moves and what that looks like. Now, one of the biggest challenges and one of the areas that we do a lot of teacher moves is in our student engagement. Student engagement is that idea of getting our students involved, participating in our lessons. And the more students are engaged, the more they are fully focused on and involved in our lessons, the better they're going to learn. And so today's focus is really on the student engagement. We want students to be active learners, not just not just listening to us talk, and especially as they're learning the language, we know they have to be participating in that speaking and the listening. And so many of us grew up, myself included, in a lot of schools where teachers did most of the talking. They did the sharing, and many of us sat in rows and listened, and maybe we took notes. And that's kind of what we tend to fall back on as teachers. We'll teach often the way we're taught. And so we have to think about and be very intentional about thinking about how can I do this differently, because it's easier to teach the way we were taught. And so planning for ways to engage your students is very, very important. We want our students to be active in the learning and not just sitting and listening to us. So this is, we want them, I always say this term, we want our students to carry the load. They'll learn more when they're carrying the learning load versus the teacher doing all the work and doing all of the talking. And so it's important to help them be engaged, and really important. Sometimes when we find in our classes that some of the students are really engaged and others are not. And so that's another thing to think about, is not just engaging some of our students, but all of them. And how do we ensure that all of the students are involved in answering the questions and sharing and talking and participating? And there are some things with our curriculum that help us do that. But there are also these teacher moves, a couple of them I'm going to just share with you today, that can also help you, and it will increase the engagement that we have with our students. And of course, that means they're going to learn more and learn better. So I want to start by having you think about a time. I want to talk about asking for a volunteer. Sometimes when we're teaching, we ask students questions, or we want someone to start off saying something to the class. And so I want you to think about a time when you have asked for a volunteer and no students responded. And I want you to think right now, what did you do? Okay, because this has happened to all of us as teachers at all levels, whether we're teaching publicly in schools, or whether we're doing tutoring or doing English classes with adults. This happens. So I want you to think, and then we're going to do something right now, what I call a think, pair, share. So I want you to think about your response to this question. Then I'm going to put you into breakout groups. And Jean, I think I'm going to have you go ahead. You can use the chat in your breakout group if that works for you. And if not, we can partner with someone in the main room with you. And that way, if you need some help, technical help, we're here to help. But I'm going to put you with a partner. And what I would like you to do is take turns with each person sharing this experience that you had when you were leading a group when teaching, and you asked somebody, asked the class, and you asked for volunteer, and no one responded. It was silent, and everyone just sat there. So in just a minute, I'll put you in the groups, and I'm going to give you a warning halfway through, so you know to switch and let the other person talk. Okay, so each person in the group will share their experience, and then we'll come back to the whole class, so the whole group, and I will talk a little bit more about what we're doing. Okay, what questions might you have about this think, pair, share activity we're going to do?
So Jen, when you put us in breakout rooms, will we, we've got to click on go to breakout room, right?
Yes, and let me see if I have the power to put you in breakout groups. Pause, share, annotate. Let me see, breakout rooms. So I'm going to do, I'm going to just assign automatically, and then you'll click, come to breakout room. And then when the time is over, just stay in the group, in the breakout room. And when the breakout room time ends, you'll come back to this main room. Okay, if you want to come back before it ends, there'll be a little button that says leave breakout room. Don't leave the meeting, or else you'll have to log back in. But if you leave the breakout room, that's okay. But it will automatically bring you back when you're done sharing with your partner this morning or this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are in the world. So let's see, we have 1, 2, I'm going to do 2 breakout rooms, and then we'll use this main room as the 3rd breakout room. Pat, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to add that John Otto has joined me here in my office, so he's not actually on a different screen.
Okay. Hi, Jean. I will. Yeah. Okay. So Pat, you can be a group of 3. So I'll just make sure I give enough time. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Let's see how this works. If not, we'll retry it. No worries. Let's see. And go ahead and join the rooms. If you see the little pop-up, it'll say join the room, and you can join. Okay. And then Melina, you and Jean could share in the chat. John, if you can share a little bit, have you ever taught a class and had a volunteer that asked for a volunteer and no students responded. What happened? What did you do? And type, feel free to type. Obviously, we can read the chat.
And while Jean is typing, I can go ahead and share mine.
Okay.
So I tend to, I tend to wait 10 seconds to see if, give them a chance to answer or respond. And if they don't, I guess my tendency is to call upon one of the stronger students who I know is going to be capable of doing it. And so they would be the one that I would choose. Sometimes I would say, do you guys want to be a volunteer or do you want to be a victim?
Yes.
And that sometimes that'll get people to raise their hand and volunteer.
Yeah. Yeah. I use that term as well. I said, all right, the next victim, volunteer, no, victim. And it lightens it a little bit.
Okay, so Jean responded.
I can take images and photos to explain more what I want them to do. Okay, so you are showing them images or photos then? You kind of model for them. Is that what you were saying? You're modeling and show them what you want them to do? Okay, yeah. Sometimes we can repeat or show or be a model. Great. Thank you so much. Let me do a quick message to everybody. Okay. We're going to give everyone some time. I know with Barbara, with Pat, they have 3 of them, so. And I will also tell them about, I think it gives us 1 minute countdown when we end breakout rooms, 1 minute or 30 seconds. Melina, do you know?
I want to say, I think it's 1 minute, but I'm not positive.
I think it's 1 minute as well.
Yeah, but that is a frustrating problem when you ask the class and no one responds at all and they're just staring at you. So I tend to rephrase it, or like John said, use images, making sure that they understand, or perhaps giving an example myself.
Yeah, that's so true. Those are all really good strategies to try to help our students. Okay, looks like people are coming back. Good. I gave them a little.
Oh yeah, it says 39, 37 seconds.
Who was with me? Jennifer?
I'm sorry?
Who was in my breakout room?
Oh, Jean, were you by yourself?
I couldn't see him there, but I couldn't see his name there at all.
Okay.
And
Oh
so
gosh.
I
Okay.
was just typing out something that says, "Are you here?" But I don't think he was
Okay.
there.
Well, that's okay.
As a participant. So
yeah. Well, can you quickly tell us what you usually did, or have you had that experience?
Well, I have a classroom that I work with, and that's a little bit different. There's limited time, of course, but I do get frustrated, especially when I just gave the answer before, or I told them what page to look on and it's right there. So I have 10% of the class that will usually answer all the questions. That's typical. I will rephrase the question. I will model the question with an answer kind of leading them. And I just started a game of tic-tac-toe, and that's really working very well.
Okay, good. Oh, thanks,
Students
Tanya.
against the teacher. If I answer it, I get the X.
Right.
If they
Right.
answer it, they,
Right. That's fun. Yeah.
well, these are junior high and elementary, I should say.
Yeah. Well, it
They're
works
not
with all
adults.
ages. It's amazing how all ages can enjoy some of the same activities. So you've come back and you've had a chance to talk with a partner, and everybody then had to respond to my question, didn't they? The question was, think of a time and tell about a time when you asked for a volunteer and no students responded. And this experience, tell me what it does is it allows in a safer, smaller group for your students all to respond. Okay. A lot of times students won't respond because they're embarrassed, right? They think they may not have the right answer, or it may not be, especially if, it's the speaking, they're just feeling inhibited. So what we want to do is create a safer environment, but not one where we rescue them. We want our students actually to struggle a little bit. We call this word grapple. To grapple. And it doesn't mean we just let them go and flail, but it's this fine line where they try themselves. And so if we make it a little bit easier by saying, okay, instead of sharing with the whole class, you can just share with one other person, and you have some time to think. And then you have some time to pair and share with each other. So that's where I get the word. And it's a common strategy in teaching in schools in America. We call it think, pair, share. So you just experienced think, pair, share as a learner would, because every one of you was asked to think, to share, and then come back to the whole group. And sometimes I use think, pair, share if I have enough time. When I bring the whole group back, I have the pairs share out together and say, what was the most amazing thing the two of you talked about? Or what was surprising in your conversation? Share one thing that you talked about. And then it gives students another opportunity to share together. So tell me, what do you think? And what are your thoughts about think, pair, share?
Well, I thought it was good to speak on a subject that this all excuse me, impacts us by the nature of the work that we're doing. Do you want to know what topics what suggestions we came up with?
Well,
just the experience?
It could go, it can go either way, because sometimes, Pat, we do come back and as a whole group talk about it. But I'm wondering what you all think about the think, pair, share process. You just participated as a learner and experienced it as a learner. And now I want you to think as a teacher, what do you think? Is this something that you think would be useful? Where do you see challenges? Is this something that you could try with your classes if you have this experience of no responders?
Okay, I want to say something.
Please do.
Okay, I think it is a very good experience about this think, pair, and share, because I think it will give the students the freedom. When the teacher is not there, sometimes the students are scary or maybe shy because the teacher is there. Mm-hmm. So the teacher is no more there. The students can feel free to share among themselves, and then everyone will have the opportunity to say what he or she has in mind without being shy that the teacher will correct immediately. And then that gives everybody to make an input in the activity, and that is going to work, I think.
Yes. And if you're in person, but even if you're online, when I do this in a class, I tell the students to start, and I do time them because sometimes you have one student who really loves to talk and one who's more shy. And so I send a message like I did with you, or I ring a bell, or I say, okay, time to switch speakers. And that way both people get the same amount of time. And then while the pairs are talking, I walk around and I listen. And that allows me to listen to each one, so I know where my student is, so I can encourage them or provide them support that they need. And that's a very important thing is when we do teacher moves, it's because we're hearing and listening and understanding where our students are. And so being able to walk around and listen is a way that I can hear all of the students. And this is also a way, sometimes we call for a volunteer. And I think Tanya was saying, what 10%, I have 10% of my students that are really engaged and involved, and the rest are sitting quietly. This forces the others to be engaged, and you get to hear them more, because you know, as a teacher, if it's just that 10% of the students, you know where those students are, but you may not know quite as well where the others are who tend to be more quiet. And so so it's important to listen as they're talking in pairs. So another thing that I want to share today, and I'm keeping my eye on the time because I want to give you time for questions, is you may have noticed that I wait a long time if you don't respond. And that is, and Melina brought this up, this wait time is so important. 10 to 15 seconds. And that's a long time. Let's just sit and wait right now. Let me set my timer. Let's sit for 10 seconds and wait. Ready? Go. Stop. That's kind of a long time of silence, right? And it's uncomfortable for us. And sometimes because of that, we'll go ahead and help save our students. They didn't know the answer, so let me help them, which sometimes is a good move, but sometimes they just need more time to think, and especially learning a language, because the processes of that translating in their head takes a lot longer. So again, just like answering the question or calling on someone when they don't volunteer, we want to help our students. It comes from a place of love and desire to help our students and care for them. But sometimes when we give them more time to think, it gives them a chance to process what we're saying and formulate an answer. Also gives them some time for confidence building, right? And sometimes I notice with some students, and even myself, I'll admit, if someone says, what questions, do you have? And they wait a long time, I might have a question, but I might think, well, I don't know if I want to ask it. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. And if the teacher moves on, then I go, okay, good. I guess I didn't want to ask the question. But if there's this long wait time, then finally I'm like, well, okay, I'll just ask the question. And so it kind of spurs me on to kind of gather my courage or say, let me ask this question. So wait time is extremely important. In my previous job, we have, it was a school system here in the United States. And we really emphasize wait time with students. And so we do it with all the adults, even in our meetings. And so it's almost a funny thing, because at the end of a meeting, we'll say, okay, are there any questions, comments? And we wait, and everybody knows we wait. And then we say it's the obligatory 14 seconds. We do 14 seconds that we wait to for people. But you know what? So many times that last after 10 seconds, like after 9, suddenly somebody responds. Suddenly somebody has a question. And it's almost never at the beginning. And that's why wait time is such a powerful thing to use with our students. So a third area, and let me just, any questions or comments about wait time? Have you experienced wait time? And the short and the longer wait time in your work?
I have, and my students will go on to Google Translate very quickly and come up with an answer.
Oh, that's the risk for sure.
I have to be honest, and they're all Farsi speakers, so even the pair share thing, you know, in the classroom, certainly I had to really monitor to make sure they were actually speaking English.
Yes, yeah.
But-
Yeah. Okay, anyone else want to share?
It certainly makes the class more interesting for everybody when you get interaction and participation. One of the difficult things for me is that student that monopolizes and wants to take over the class. They're just as difficult as the ones that are reticent to speak.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe Pat, I saved some time at the end for questions. Maybe we can talk about that and work together this morning or this afternoon or this evening and talk about that as well, because that's sometimes a related problem. It's kind of the opposite problem of not having someone respond. What do you do when someone responds a lot and dominates? Yeah. Anyone else want to share about wait time experiences?
Yeah, I think especially with English learners, it's important to rephrase the question. And so I will say the question and wait a few seconds and then rephrase it in a different way and wait a few seconds, because sometimes there's just like a word that they're not getting, and that can be helpful.
Absolutely. We have to imagine all of the things going through the brain, translating from one language to the next. Definitely. What's interesting is your students and my students have always learned that if they don't reply, I'll go on and I'll save them. I'll give them the answer. And so the wait time puts them into that zone where they think, oh, she's not going to save us. I'm going to have to come up with something. I'm going to at least try it. And so that's another benefit of wait time. And so another teacher move is similar to think, pair, share, is sometimes breaking your class into smaller groups can help students carry the learning load better. And it can help you, like I said, just with the think, pair, share, when you have them in pairs, you can also listen, and it helps you understand where they are, their understanding, their pronunciation, because you can walk around and listen to multiple students. And we kind of did smaller response groups because Pat and Jean in Cotonou were together. And so that was a group of 3. So, you know, sometimes when you're in your lessons, there are times when we have our students repeat what we're saying as a whole group. And we say, okay, everybody repeat after me, listen and now repeat. And so a really good in-between zone, and many of you may have done this before, is also to do smaller groups, using smaller groups to repeat instead of people by themselves individually, which again, is sometimes they feel insecure, or they're feeling not quite confident yet. And so if they get to do it with a couple of other people, chorally out loud, that it helps them as well. And so you can randomly, you can put your students in any type of group. If they're sitting in chairs or sitting at desks, you can put 3 of them together and say, okay, you 3 now, you repeat. And then over here, the next 3. And then over here, now the next 3 sitting on this other side of the room. And they can share out loud together. And then maybe you can go into the individual practice. But you can also put your students into specific groups. Okay, for example, you might think about students whose skills are not as strong, putting them with students who have very strong skills, okay, so that they can listen and learn from the person who has the stronger skills. And you can do this with think, pair, share, and you can also do this with smaller oral response groups by thinking about how those that need a little more practice, because sometimes in your classes, I'm sure you have varying levels of students. And so when those that have the lower levels of English can be partnered and be able to learn from and build some confidence with someone that has higher level skills, that can be helpful. So let's see if we can't show you how this works. So here we have, of course, one of our favorite verses, John 3:16. So for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. John 3:16. So I might, if I'm teaching a class, say, okay, whole class, repeat after me. So I'd say, okay, so let's do this together. So unmute yourselves. And I'm going to do a countdown, 1, 2, and on 3, we will all read aloud this verse. Okay, but we're going to do whole class. So you just listen to me. Okay, so now you're going to repeat. Ready? 1, 2, 3. For God
so
loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. John 3:16. So then I would say, okay, Melina and Tanya and Barbara, will you now together read our verse? Ready? 1, 2, 3.
For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life.
Very good. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Pat and John, and I think we have some others joining us, Prakesh, and who else do we have? Another person has jumped in. Why don't you guys do our verse aloud? Are you ready? 1, 2, 3.
For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. John 3:16.
Very good. Thank you. So in this way, you can add the number of times that people get to practice. You provide them safety when you feel and you sense by their body language and their faces. Sometimes students look down because they're like, oh, please don't call on me. I don't want to do it. And that sends you the message. That's that feedback that I was talking about in the beginning, that, okay, they need a little more safety and confidence. So maybe in a smaller group, they'll feel that safety. And even if they won't do it out loud, that's when maybe you shift to a think, pair, share, where, okay, do it just with your group while everybody at the same time, because that's a little safer versus saying it out loud while the rest of the group is listening. And those are the teacher moves that allow you to engage your students and to get all of them engaged in the talking and even with writing or reading. Let's say you want students to do some writing. We've done a lot of talking today because we're virtual. But if your students, if you want them to do some writing, and it seems like they might be challenged by this, sometimes doing it together in a group with a partner or with a small group can be helpful first before having someone do it by themselves individually. And that's a way you can kind of create another level so that, again, everyone's engaged and participating. And that means they're learning faster and learning better than when they're just sitting, not carrying the learning load. So those were my 3 strategies I wanted to share with you today. And I want to give us some time for questions on any of the things I've shared today. If you need clarification, I'm happy to do that. And then to maybe talk about other questions you might have. So.
One of the things that I don't think we did discuss, which is very useful, is cueing students. So you give them a cue. My mother, when I was a child, when I was struggling, sometimes she would give me the beginning letter of the word and then the first syllable of the word. And I use that quite a bit, just to, because we've already introduced it, just to help them remember. Sometimes it doesn't work, but a lot of times it does. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, Barbara. It's a wonderful suggestion. And that idea of cueing, in America, we call it scaffolding. Scaffolding kind of helps hold up a building. So you kind of give them a little bit to help them along. They can still struggle and grapple and learn, but you give them a little lift and a hint, a cue. Thank you. That's a wonderful idea.
And lots of praise when they actually get it. That's the other thing. So they feel they've done it themselves. Yeah.
Yes. Which they have compared to you just giving them the answer.
Yes, actually, yes. Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much for sharing. Other questions or thoughts on some of the teacher moves today?
Do you have time to touch on the monopolizer?
We can definitely do that. So I want to open that question up to the whole group with all of your experiences and your, maybe you've had a monopolizer. I think most of us have. I'm sure I was a monopolizer, probably. So I've been the monopolizer on the other end. So tell me and let's share a little bit of our experience with that. Who'd like to share their experience and what might have worked for you in dealing with a monopolizer?
Well, for me, I was one as well. Once I found my voice in the classroom. In different groups, I can be that person, but I know that it doesn't help anybody to learn. I come from a classical background where it's definitely engagement in small conversations where there is, which is the higher form of learning. It takes all that other learning before to get to there to be able to talk about a topic or to talk in a language. So for me, over the years in a classroom situation, about 12 students around there, I have, recognized them. Sometimes I'll do like, okay, just wait 1 second, just wait. I recognize that you have the answer. But now I kind of motion, I say, now I'm going to look for others as well, because this person has already answered a couple questions in a row. And so he knows what's going on. I've also had conversations with students outside of class and said, hey, I really appreciate all your answers, because I really do. Yeah, because I'm getting at least the feedback that someone understands, but they probably already understood before they came to class anyhow, right? But just recognizing the importance of others as well. And so that's helped as well, those two
Yeah.
things. But yeah, that, and I guess generally that's but the two right now that I can think of.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks so much for sharing two good ideas to try. Anyone else have some tips that they might be able to provide us today?
I think timing is also a good tool which can help for preventing the monopolizers to talk over and over. But one thing that gives strength to monopolizers to talk a lot is because the others are shy, they don't want to speak. So they think, okay, since the others are not speaking, I have the whole time to talk. So to come back to the teacher now to know how to engage, to involve the others, and by timing, when you time, you say, okay, you have 1 minute, or I don't know, 15 seconds to finish whatever you have to say, and then give the turn to the other one. I think that also works.
So you use a timer. Yeah.
Yeah,
that works. And especially if you are having people work in groups, you can do those timers then. Yeah.
There was one other thing I thought of. What I'll do is I'll say, I'm going to wait until I have at least, 10 people with their hand up saying, yes, I can respond to this. And that'll help. And then but yeah, waiting until I'll physically say that I'm going to wait until we have more people that are, because the answer is typically right there in the book. They just have to look down. I've told them they just have to look down and read the header. I mean, it depends on the question that's being asked too.
Right.
It really does.
Yeah. And sometimes, Tanya, I think of times when, and I've used that strategy, when instead of asking for a volunteer, saying, okay, I've asked a question, and then I say, when you have the answer ready, put your hand up. And then you wait for everybody's hand to come up.
Yeah.
And then you as the teacher can pick someone and say, and then make sure. And I went so far as a teacher, even writing down the names to make sure, especially if I had a bigger group, to make sure that every single student during that lesson is called on at some point. And trying to do fewer volunteers and more of me picking and allowing multiple people to respond and letting them signal to me with their hand that they have an answer in their head and they're ready to respond. And some may put their hand up anyway, because you're waiting and maybe they're the last person, and that's okay. But you still want everybody to try and to reward the effort. Failure is just a chance to learn what doesn't work and what's not the correct way. And so that's a whole other topic of setting a mindset that being wrong isn't a bad thing. It's something now that you just learned what not to do or what the sound isn't. And so that's kind of a different topic. But I think really allowing yourself as the teacher to control who's speaking by the way you have them respond is another way that you can keep someone from monopolizing. Yes. And I've used a timer too, and I've used the calling on people, and sometimes and it comes from actually elementary school in America, but I've used it with adults. I get everybody's name and I randomly pull it out of a box and I say, okay, it's Barbara's turn. And then I set her name aside and I pull someone else's name the next time. And then once I've gone through everybody's name, then you put them all back in. And again, that just ensures that all of your students are getting a chance to be engaged and learn. So, Okay, good questions. Oh my goodness, an hour has passed already. I'm happy to answer a few more questions if needed, but I also want to respect your time and what you have going today. So thank you so much for joining us. It's so great to meet you all and see some old friends as well. And I'm hoping to be able to join you again one day.